Colton Ward had spent the whole day riding the long trail back from town, and the sun had already dropped behind the hills by the time he reached the narrow dirt road leading to his ranch. The night was colder than usual, and the wind carried a sharp bite that made him tighten the collar of his coat. His horse, a calm chestnut gelding, walked steadily, as if it knew the way, even in the dark. Colton was tired, but his mind stayed alert. He had lived alone long enough to know that the world changed after sunset. A quiet road could hide many things: animals, broken wagons, strangers in trouble. He was not the type to ignore something unusual, and that night, something unusual happened. As he reached the bend near his old fence line, his horse suddenly slowed. Colton frowned. The horse sensed something ahead. He held the reins steady and let his eyes adjust to the moonlight. At first, he saw only the shape of the fence and a few scattered rocks. But then he noticed a small form near the wooden posts, someone kneeling. His heart kicked harder, not from fear, but from surprise. It was dangerous for anyone to be out at this hour, especially alone. He guided his horse closer and stopped several feet away. The kneeling figure did not move, as if too tired or too cold to react. Colton slowly dismounted, placing a calm hand on the horse's neck to keep it steady. His boots crunched softly against the dirt as he walked forward. When he was close enough, he saw that it was a woman. Her clothes were dusty, her hands shaking, and her hair tangled by the wind. She was not injured from what he could tell, but the exhaustion on her face was clear. She looked like someone whose strength had finally run out. "Ma'am?" Colton spoke gently, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't startle her. "Are you all right?" The woman slowly lifted her head, and her eyes met his. They were filled with fear, but also something else, a deep kind of hope that appeared when someone had no other choice. Her voice came out weak and tired. "Please, I just need one night. Just one night of mercy. I can't walk anymore. I can't stay out here." Her words were simple, but the weight behind them was heavy. She wasn't begging for money or asking for favors beyond what a decent person would offer someone in trouble. She only asked for warmth, safety, a chance to rest. Colton felt a small ache in his chest. He didn't know her, didn't know where she came from, but he could see she was at her breaking point. He offered a slow nod. "All right. Don't worry. You're safe. Now." He didn't touch her at first. He knew she might be scared. But when she swayed a little, like her body was about to give up, he stepped forward and placed his coat around her shoulders. It was warm, thick, and still held the heat from his ride. The moment it wrapped around her, she breathed out shakily, as if the simple act of being covered made her feel human again. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Lena," she whispered. "Lena Hart." "I'm Colton Ward," he replied. "My ranch is just half a mile ahead. You can rest there tonight." He helped her stand, carefully holding her arm so she wouldn't fall. Even standing seemed hard for her, but she tried, with whatever strength she had left. Colton led her to his horse, lifting her gently into the saddle before mounting behind her. She didn't lean on him at first, maybe afraid to be a burden, but when the horse started moving, her tired body shifted until her shoulder rested lightly against his chest. He didn't mind. She needed the support. The ride to the ranch was quiet, except for the wind and the steady sound of the horse's hooves. Colton kept one arm around her to make sure she didn't slip. He could feel how cold she was, even through the coat. Each time the horse stepped over a bump, she tensed a little, as if bracing herself. He could only imagine how far she had walked and how long she had been alone out here. When they reached the ranch, Colton helped Lena down and guided her inside. His home was simple but warm, with a stone fireplace, wooden floors, and a small kitchen to the side. He lit a lantern and placed it on the table, filling the room with soft yellow light. Lena looked around with wide eyes, as if she couldn't believe she was somewhere safe. "You can sit," he said, pulling a chair out for her. She shook her head. "I don't want to trouble you." "You're not," Colton answered. "You're exhausted. Sit." She obeyed, but her hands still shook from the cold and nerves. Colton went to the fireplace, added more wood, and lit it. Within minutes, the room warmed noticeably. He retrieved a blanket from the storage chest and draped it over her shoulders. Lena held onto it tightly, as if the warmth brought her back to life. "Do you need water?" he asked. She nodded. He poured her a cup and handed it to her. Lena drank slowly, careful not to spill. Every small action looked painful from exhaustion, but she pushed through. When she finally closed her eyes for a moment, he realized she might fall asleep right there. Colton didn't ask any questions about her past. He sensed she wasn't ready to talk. Instead, he focused on helping her feel safe. "You can use the guest room," he said quietly. "It has a good bed. You'll rest better there." Lena looked up at him, and for the first time, her eyes softened. Colton shook his head gently. "You don't need to thank me for something that any decent person should do." He showed her the guest room. A simple space with a clean bed, warm quilts, and a small window facing the fields. Lena stood in the doorway, touching the blanket as if unsure whether she deserved it. But after a few seconds, she stepped inside. "If you need anything," Colton told her, "I'll be in the next room." She nodded again, still overwhelmed by the sudden kindness after a long day of fear and uncertainty. Colton stepped out and let her close the door. He didn't lock anything, didn't question her, didn't show suspicion. He knew trust was something fragile, especially for someone who had been abandoned. Once alone, Colton didn't go to sleep. He sat near the fireplace, keeping the lantern lit just enough to see shadows moving outside the windows. He stayed awake not out of fear of Lena, but out of concern for whoever might have left her behind. People who abandoned someone once might come looking later, pretending to be worried or trying to save face. The night grew colder, and the wind howled against the house. But inside the ranch, everything stayed calm. Colton checked the door twice and peered out the window to make sure no riders were on the road. The silence felt heavy but peaceful, like the land itself understood that a tired stranger finally found a place to breathe. As the hours passed, Colton found himself thinking about Lena. Her soft voice, her trembling hands, the way she seemed ready to collapse but still tried to stay strong. She wasn't a helpless person, just someone pushed too far. Someone who needed a single moment of mercy, and he happened to be the one she met on that cold night. When he finally checked the guest room once more, he saw her asleep, wrapped in the blanket, looking peaceful for the first time. The sight made him breathe easier. She looked like someone who had carried a heavy weight for too long and had finally put it down. Colton returned to his seat but didn't sleep. He kept watch, feeling a quiet promise in his heart. A promise that no one would hurt the woman who had dropped to her knees on the cold dirt road and asked him for mercy. Not tonight. Not while she was under his roof. The night passed slowly, but for the first time in a long time, the ranch didn't feel lonely. It felt like the start of something unexpected, something meaningful, something that would change both of their lives in ways neither of them could see yet. Colton woke early the next morning, long before the sun climbed over the hills. He had barely slept, but he didn't feel tired. His mind kept returning to the woman resting in the guest room. He wondered if she was warm enough, if she slept peacefully, and if she trusted him even a little after such a hard night. He moved quietly around the kitchen, making sure not to wake her. He lit the stove, heated water, and prepared a simple breakfast: eggs, bread, and warm tea. As the smell of food filled the cabin, the place felt less lonely than usual. After a few minutes, he heard soft footsteps. Lena appeared in the doorway, holding the blanket around her shoulders. Her hair was still tangled, and her eyes looked tired but clearer than last night. She stood there shyly, as if unsure whether she was allowed to enter the kitchen. "You can come in," Colton said with a gentle smile. Lena stepped forward, her movements small and careful. She looked around the room as though she was seeing it in daylight for the first time. The wooden floor, the neat shelves, the quiet flames on the stove, it all felt safe to her, almost unreal. "Did you sleep all right?" he asked. She gave a soft nod. "Yes, more than I expected. Your home is very warm." "I try to keep it that way," Colton said. "Sit, please. You should eat." Lena hesitated again before taking a seat at the table. When he placed the plate in front of her, she stared at it for a long moment, almost emotional. She picked up the bread slowly, as though she wasn't used to someone cooking for her. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "I know," Colton answered honestly, "but you needed it." She looked down, her hands trembling slightly but not from fear now. This time, it was gratitude. She took a small bite, then another, and soon, she finished the whole plate. She even apologized for eating so quickly. But he just shook his head. "You don't owe me an apology for being hungry." For a while, they sat in quiet peace. The sunlight finally seeped through the window, casting warm lines across the table. Lena's face softened in the light, and some of the worry faded from her eyes. Colton could tell she was thinking deeply about something. He decided not to rush her. After a few moments, she finally spoke. "I should tell you what happened. You deserve to know why I was out there." "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to say," Colton replied. But Lena shook her head firmly. "No. I want to. You helped me when I had no one. You deserve the truth." Colton stayed silent, letting her gather her thoughts. She stared at her hands for a moment before beginning, her voice thin but steady. "I was traveling with a group," she said. "They promised work, shelter, a new start. I thought I could trust them. But when times got hard, they wanted to move faster. I couldn't keep up. I twisted my ankle a few days ago, and I slowed them down. Instead of helping me, they left me behind." Colton felt his jaw tighten. He didn't interrupt, but his eyes darkened with quiet anger not toward her, but toward the people who abandoned her so easily. "They told me they'd send someone back," Lena continued, "but no one came. I walked for hours, then miles, trying to find a road, trying to find anyone. My legs were shaking, and I thought I'd fall before I reached anything. Then, the night came. I knew I wouldn't make it through the cold. And Loxus, 10. She took a deep breath and looked up at him. "When I saw your fence, I thought maybe someone kind lived there. I didn't know you, but I prayed you weren't the type who would turn me away." "You came to the right place," Colton said softly. She gave him a small smile, fragile but real. As the morning went on, Lena insisted on helping with chores. She didn't want to sit idle while he worked. Colton tried to tell her she didn't need to, but she insisted with quiet determination. So he gave her simple tasks, washing dishes, folding blankets, brushing the horses. She did each one carefully, as if afraid of making mistakes. But Colton watched from a distance and admired her strong spirit. She had been through so much, yet she still wanted to stand on her own feet. While she worked, Colton went into town for supplies. He didn't mention Lena to anyone. He kept his answers short and stayed out of conversations. Still, he heard whispers. People claimed a stranger had been spotted on the outskirts of town. Some said she looked suspicious. Others said she might be trouble. Colton ignored them, but he didn't like the sound of it. People could be harsh when they didn't know someone's story. When he returned to the ranch, Lena was sitting on the porch steps, watching the open land like she was learning its shape. When she saw him, she stood quickly. "You didn't have to wait outside," he told her. "I wanted to see if you'd come back," she said honestly. Colton's heart softened again. Of course I'd come back. Inside, she helped him put away supplies. She moved more confidently, now that she understood the layout of the house. Her ankle still bothered her, but she tried not to show it. As they worked, she asked questions about the ranch, the town, the people who lived nearby. Colton answered what he could, keeping things simple so she wouldn't worry. When she asked about him, he kept his reply humble. He lived alone, worked with horses and cattle, and minded his own business. "You have a peaceful life," Lena said softly. "It's quiet," he agreed. "Sometimes too quiet." She smiled faintly. "Last night, I thought I might not make it. But then you came along. I don't think I've ever been this grateful." "You don't need to thank me," Colton said again. "Anyone should have helped you." "But not everyone would," Lena replied. Her words struck him in a way he didn't expect. It was true. Many people would have kept riding, pretending not to see her. He felt a stronger sense of responsibility then, not because she asked for it, but because she deserved someone to stand by her. Later in the afternoon, Lena helped feed the horses. She moved slowly, still adjusting to her injured ankle, but she smiled each time a horse nudged her hand for more feed. Colton watched her carefully, ready to step in if she needed help. At one point, she lost balance slightly, and he reached out to steady her. She froze, surprised, then gave a shy nod of thanks before continuing. As the day passed, the air felt different, lighter. The ranch didn't feel like a place for one anymore. Lena's presence brought warmth to the empty hallways and life to the quiet rooms. But the peace didn't last long. Before sunset, a rider passed by the road near the ranch, staring too long toward the property. Colton didn't recognize him, but the man's eyes were sharp, searching, curious. When Colton stepped outside, the rider quickly turned away and continued onward. Lena didn't see it, but Colton did, and it made a knot twist in his chest. Something told him Lena's past wasn't as far behind as she hoped. As night approached, Colton made stew for dinner, and Lena helped chop vegetables. They talked more about small things, soft things, nothing painful. She laughed once, quietly, as if she hadn't heard her own laughter in a long time. Colton didn't say it aloud, but the sound eased something inside him. When they finished eating, Colton finally spoke about his concern. Her eyes widened slightly. "Do you think they'll come?" He didn't want to lie. "Maybe. But if they do, you're not alone." Lena lowered her gaze, her voice almost trembling. "No one has ever said that to me before." "You have someone saying it now," Colton replied. She looked up again, meeting his eyes with quiet strength. "Thank you for giving me a place to breathe." That night, when she returned to the guest room, Colton stayed awake again. He listened to the wind outside, watched the shadows around the ranch, and kept his rifle loaded not for violence, but for protection if needed. He had no desire for trouble, but he would not let fear enter his home. Inside her room, Lena lay awake too. Not from fear this time, but from unfamiliar comfort. She wrapped herself in the blanket he'd given her and stared at the moonlight through the window. She felt safe, maybe for the first time in years. Safe enough to hope, safe enough to rest, safe enough to imagine a tomorrow that didn't feel dark. Outside, Colton kept watch. Inside, Lena slept peacefully. Both of them sensed it in their own way. This was no ordinary meeting. Something had brought them together on that cold road. Something neither of them understood yet. But one thing was certain. Their lives had already begun to change. Colton woke before dawn again. But this time, something in the air felt different. The sky was still dark, the fields still silent, yet he sensed a tension floating over the land. He couldn't explain it clearly, but years of living alone on a ranch had taught him how to feel trouble before it arrived. When a man lived with nature long enough, he learned its moods, and today the land felt uneasy. He stepped outside, boots crunching against the cool dirt. The early morning wind carried a thin chill, as if warning him to stay alert. He scanned the road leading to town, then the path running toward the hills. Nothing yet. But the memory of the rider who stared at his ranch yesterday stayed sharp in his mind. Inside the house, Lena was awake too. She had slept, but not deeply. She stepped quietly into the kitchen, and when she saw Colton at the window, she knew something was worrying him. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly. Colton turned to her, keeping his expression calm. "Nothing happened. I'm just being careful." Lena didn't ask more. She sensed he was trying to protect her without making her afraid. Instead, she moved around the kitchen, helping him prepare breakfast. She walked with a slight limp, but she ignored the discomfort. She wanted to show she wasn't weak. She wanted to earn her place under his roof, even if she didn't know what the future held. After breakfast, Colton went to check the horses and cattle, and Lena followed him outside. She enjoyed being near the animals. They made her feel calm. The horses especially seemed to like her. One nuzzled her shoulder while she brushed its mane, and she laughed gently, scratching behind its ear. Colton watched from a short distance. There was something peaceful about seeing her smile. She brought a warmth to the ranch he hadn't felt in a long time. But his moment of calm didn't last. As he led a horse back toward the barn, he saw dust rising from the road. Someone was approaching fast, more than one person. He stiffened and stepped forward, placing himself between the riders and the house. "Lena," he said without looking back, "go inside." She froze, sensing the change in his voice. "Is it them?" "I don't know yet," he replied. "But go inside and lock the door." She obeyed immediately, though her heartbeat raced. She hurried into the house, closed the door, and pushed the wooden bar into place. Inside, she stood close to the window, peeking through the curtain with trembling hands. Outside, Colton watched as 3 riders approached his land. They were the same men Lena had described, the ones she traveled with, the ones who left her behind. Their faces were tense, their clothes dusty, and their horses tired. They were clearly searching for her. The riders slowed as they reached his fence. The one in front called out sharply, "Morning! We're looking for someone. Have you seen a young woman around here?" Colton didn't move from his place. "What woman?" "She ran off from our group," the man replied. "Caused trouble. Took a few supplies, too. We just want to bring her back." Lena watched from inside, her heart sinking. She knew these men. They never told the truth, unless they needed something. She clutched the curtain tighter as she waited for Colton's response. Colton narrowed his eyes. "You got proof she stole anything?" The men exchanged looks. They hadn't expected him to question them. "She doesn't belong out here alone," another man said quickly. "She's confused. We need to find her." Colton shook his head slowly. "That's not an answer. You abandoned her on the road." "That's what I heard." The leader's face tightened. "Who told you that?" Colton didn't reply. His silence made the men uneasy. The leader's tone turned harsh. "Listen, Cowboy. She's part of our group. She left without permission. She needs to come back with us. If you're hiding her—" "I'm not hiding anyone," Colton said firmly. "But even if she were here, she wouldn't be your property." The leader's expression darkened. His horse stepped forward aggressively, but Colton didn't move an inch. His calmness only frustrated them more. "You shouldn't get involved," the man warned. "You don't understand what she's done." Colton's voice was steady. "You left her in the cold. That tells me enough." The men shifted uncomfortably. They weren't used to being challenged, especially by someone standing alone on his land. They exchanged whispered words, then turned their horses around. But before leaving, the leader gave Colton a cold look. "We're not done here. We'll be back." They rode off, kicking up dust as they disappeared around the bend. Colton stayed still until the dust settled. Only then did he finally step back toward the house. Inside, Lena had backed away from the window, her breath shaking. When Colton entered, She stood up quickly. "Were those the same men?" he asked gently. Lena nodded, eyes wide with fear. "Yes. They lied to you. They always lie. They want to make themselves look right, even when they hurt someone." Colton nodded slowly. He already suspected as much. Lena hesitated before speaking again. "They won't give up. They'll come again." "I know," he said simply. "But you're safe here." Her eyes filled with emotion, not just fear, but relief and disbelief. She moved closer, voice trembling. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me." Colton took a quiet breath. "You asked me for help when you had nothing. That's enough." For the rest of the morning, Lena tried to distract herself with chores, but her hands were shaky. She dropped a dish at one point, apologizing over and over, even though it didn't break. Colton gently told her she didn't have to push herself. Still, she refused to rest. By afternoon, dark clouds rolled in from the west. A storm was coming. The wind grew stronger, rattling the windows and carrying the smell of rain. Lena stood on the porch, gazing nervously at the road. Colton joined her. "You all right?" She nodded, though her voice was soft. I can't believe they found me this quickly." "They won't take you," Colton said firmly. "Not while you're here." The wind blew her hair across her face, and she brushed it aside with shaky fingers. "I don't want to bring trouble to your home. In 7 difference, let's now in grime," and she brushed adjusted differenza. "You're not," he replied. Trouble showed up on its own. A small smile flickered in her eyes despite everything. When the rain finally came, it poured hard against the roof, drowning out the sounds of the world outside. The storm made the ranch feel even more isolated. Lena sat near the fireplace, warming her hands as the flames crackled. Colton sat across from her, cleaning tools and keeping an ear out for anything unusual. During the quiet moments between thunder, Lena spoke again. "I never thought someone would stand up for me." Colton met her gaze. "You deserve someone to stand up for you." Her eyes softened. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay your kindness." "You don't have to repay anything," he said. "Just stay safe." The storm lasted for hours. By evening, the thunder faded, and the rain softened. But the uneasy feeling didn't leave the ranch. Lena felt it too. The men would return. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe sooner. As night settled, Colton checked the locks on every door and window. Lena watched him quietly, knowing he was doing all of this because of her. A deep gratitude filled her chest, mixed with fear that something might happen to him because he chose to protect her. When she went to the guest room to rest, she paused at the door and looked at him. "Colton, I'm scared." "I know," he said softly. "But I'm here." She nodded, drawing comfort from his calmness, and closed the door behind her. Colton stayed awake again that night. He sat by the window, watching the road, listening to the quiet after the storm. His rifle rested beside him, though he hoped he would never need it. Outside, the wind whispered through the wet grass. Inside, Lena slept uneasily, knowing tomorrow could bring new danger. The ranch was still. The night was deep, and both of them knew the real trouble was only beginning. Colton barely slept that night. Even after the storm passed, the ranch felt unsettled, like the wind had carried warning instead of rain. He sat near the window with a lantern dimly glowing beside him, watching the road for any sign of movement. His thoughts kept drifting to Lena, sleeping in the guest room. He had met her only recently, yet protecting her felt as natural as breathing. He didn't know why, but he accepted it without question. At dawn, the sky turned pale gold. The quiet morning almost fooled him into believing the danger had passed. But Colton knew better. People who abandoned others so easily rarely accepted defeat. They would return not because they cared about Lena, but because they didn't want to look wrong in front of anyone. Pride made some men do foolish things. Lena stepped out of her room just as he finished checking the locks for the fourth time. Her hair was tied loosely, and her eyes looked more rested than the day before, but fear lingered beneath the calm surface. "You didn't sleep again," she said softly. Colton didn't deny it. "Had to keep watch." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This is my fault." "No, it's not," he said firmly. "You didn't choose to be abandoned." She lowered her gaze, still blaming herself even though he tried to ease her worries. He made breakfast, and they sat together in quiet tension. Lena tried to eat, but her appetite was weak. She kept glancing toward the windows, listening for sounds beyond the ranch. Colton noticed. Every time her hands trembled slightly, he wanted to reassure her, but he also knew she needed to grow her own strength. Comfort was important, but so was courage. After breakfast, they stepped outside. The land sparkled with drops of rain, and the sky stretched wide and open. Lena breathed in the fresh morning air, trying to calm the pounding in her chest. "Colton," she said hesitantly, "I don't want you to get hurt because of me." He turned toward her. "Lena, I'm not afraid of them, and I'm not letting you face them alone." She swallowed hard. "I don't want to run anymore." Colton studied her face, reading the new strength forming in her eyes. "Then you won't run. We'll handle this the right way." Lena nodded slowly. For the first time since they met, she didn't seem ready to collapse under fear. She was tired of being afraid, tired of being treated like she didn't matter. They spent the morning repairing small things around the ranch. Broken fence rails from the storm, loose hinges on the barn door. The work helped steady Lena's thoughts. Every hammer strike, every board lifted, made her feel a bit stronger. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't someone to be tossed aside. She had value, and Colton's belief in her made her believe it too. Around noon, a cloud of dust rose in the distance. Colton stiffened immediately. "They're coming," he said quietly. Lena's breath caught. "Again?" "Stay close," he said. "But this time, you're not hiding." 3 riders appeared, the same men as before. Their expressions were darker now, their posture rigid with anger. As they approached the ranch, Colton stepped forward, while Lena stood slightly behind him, gripping the edge of her sleeve tightly. The leader stopped his horse in front of them. "We warned you yesterday," he said sharply. "Where's the girl?" Colton didn't step aside. "She's here." Lena's heart hammered, but she stepped forward beside Colton. The wind blew across the field as she lifted her chin and faced the men who once abandoned her. "What do you want from me?" she asked. The leader smirked. "We told you you caused trouble for the group. You owe us supplies. You owe us time. You belong with us until you repay it." Lena shook her head. "You left me behind. We had no choice." The second man growled. "You slowed us down." "That doesn't make me your property," Lena replied, voice trembling but steady. Colton felt a quiet surge of pride at her courage. The leader glared at Colton. "Cowboy, you don't understand the situation. She's our responsibility." "No," Colton said calmly. "You stopped being responsible the moment you left her to freeze in the dark." The men shifted in their saddles, frustrated and cornered by the truth. "You're going to hand her over," the leader snapped. Or, he didn't finish the sentence, because at that moment, another horse approached from behind them. A 4th rider appeared, Sheriff Miles Turner. The sheriff stopped his horse beside Colton, adjusting his hat with a serious expression. "Morning," he said coolly. "Seems you all are having a bit of a disagreement." The leader straightened, trying to sound respectful. "Sheriff, this is none of your business. We're just collecting someone who ran away from our group." Miles raised a brow. "I heard rumors that a young woman was abandoned outside town. Dangerous thing to do in this weather." His gaze moved to Lena. "Miss, do you want to go with them?" Lena's voice cracked but stayed firm. "No, I want to stay here." And did you steal anything from them? The sheriff asked. No, she said truthfully. They lied. The sheriff turned to the men. You have proof she stole something? Silence. They had none. The sheriff leaned forward, his tone turning colder. Then, I'd advise you to leave. Forcing someone to go with you without reason can bring serious trouble. The men exchanged angry looks. They knew they had no legal power now. The leader clenched his jaw. She's going to regret choosing this cowboy over us, he spat. Colton stepped closer, his posture steady as stone. She won't regret anything here. The men finally turned their horses around. Their frustration burned in their eyes. But they were powerless with the sheriff there. As they rode away, the dust cloud behind them faded into the distance. Lena's knees grew weak with relief, and she grabbed the porch railing to steady herself. Colton quickly moved beside her. It's over, he said gently. The sheriff tipped his hat to Colton. You did right, Ward. Not many folks would have stood up like that. Colton nodded. Just doing what's right. The sheriff looked at Lena. If you ever need to speak with the law about anything, you know where to find me. You're safe here. With that, the sheriff rode off, leaving the ranch quiet again. Lena stood still for a long moment. Tears forming in her eyes, not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming weight lifting off her shoulders. I didn't think anyone would ever stand up for me like that, she whispered. You deserved it, Colton replied. She looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. Colton, I don't know where I'll go next. But I don't want to go back to the kind of life I had. You don't have to leave, Colton said softly. Not unless you want to. A warm silence settled between them. The wind felt gentle now. The land peaceful instead of threatening. Do you really mean that? She asked quietly. I do. She took a breath, steady and full of new strength. Then, I want to stay. I want to work. I want to build a life where I'm not scared every day. Colton nodded. Then this place is your home as long as you need it. Lena felt her heart steady, her steps firming as she stood beside him. The ranch looked different now, not just a place of shelter, but a place where she could grow, heal, and find purpose. For Colton, the ranch no longer felt empty. Not with Lena's laughter, her quiet determination, and her gentle presence filling the rooms. The trouble was gone, but something else had taken its place. A bond formed from trust, kindness, and an unexpected meeting on a cold night. And though neither said it aloud, both felt the same truth. Their story was only just beginning.